deployed to curb cases of exam cheating also arrested 5 imposters writing exams for candidates at 2 centres in Nairobi and in Kericho. The Kenya National Examinations Council also nabbed 17 mobile phones from students sitting for their KCSE exam in 2 separate incidents in Moyale and Saku constituencies in Marsabit County. And as Mary Moki reports, the second day of the KCSE exam was marred by widespread irregularities, even as the government clarified that examinations will go on in the affected schools as individual culprits face prosecution.
Siaya, Samburu, Kericho and Kitui counties led in the number of suspects arrested. In Siaya, Rachar Secondary School in Siaya County topped the list of shame with 5 suspects arrested. The 5 including the school principal Patrick Omondi, the invigilator Paul Akumba, the center's supervisor Victor Amolo, the school secretary Faith Odhiambo. Also nabbed was the school cook Millicent Awino Oluoch. Moi Girls High School in Maralal, Samburu County also had 3 officials arrested. The 3 are Peter Longono, John Lomleti, and Robert Omondi Odhiambo, who are the center manager, exam supervisor, and the dean of studies, respectively. Kericho Day Secondary School in Kericho County was also caught in cheating, with the police arresting 3 imposters sitting the exams. A Kenyatta University student Duncan Kipkemoi Kipkirui was caught writing the exams for candidate Aaron Kiptoo Ngeno. Also caught with the offense of impersonating was Aaron Kiptoo Ngeno and Desmond Kipkorir Bet, both students from Kabianga University, who were writing exams for Geoffrey Kipyegon Bosuben and Amos Korir Kipyegon. In Nairobi, 2 imposters were arrested in Kongoni South Sea doing exams for 2 candidates who paid 30,000 and 20,000 respectively. 2 other examination officials were arrested in Kitui. Nyamira and Bungoma counties also registered examination irregularities. In Marsabit County, 8 people were arrested and 9 students were caught at Sesi Mixed Secondary School in Moyale with mobile phones, while another 8 private candidates were nabbed in Saku. According to the police report, NEC officials on duty noticed that some candidates had mobile phones and ordered them to surrender. Marsabit Central Assistant County Commissioner David Saruni says the candidates were, however, allowed to continue with their chemistry paper 1 exam, with the DCI launching further investigations into the malpractices. The government has also announced that candidates and schools caught up in the malpractices will be allowed to continue with the exam while investigations and prosecution of the liable gets underway. Mary Moki, Citizen TV.
The University Academic Staff Union, UASU, and the Kenya University's Staff Union, KUSU, say lecturers must be paid 80% of their pending 2017-2021 salary increment arrears, amounting to 7.9 billion shillings in a single installment, before calling off their strike. The Ministries of Education and Treasury, however, say that is not possible, insisting the government can only pay the balance in 2 equal installments of 50% each. Willie Lusige reports.
The nationwide strike by lecturers and staff in public universities has entered its 48th day, paralyzing learning across higher education institutions.
For the Education Committee,
UASU and KUSU, the unions representing lecturers and non-teaching staff, appeared before the Parliamentary Committee on Education to express what they termed as frustration with the government for refusing to pay them 7.9 billion shillings in salary arrears for the 2017-2021 period.
Will the unions urge this honorable committee to prevail upon IPCCF, Ministry of Education, and the National Treasury to release the outstanding 7.9 billion at once?
The Parliamentary Committee demanded accountability, questioning why the government has allowed the strike to persist.
What is very, very key for the unions is the implementation of 2017-2021. And now they move on.
Are we saying that the ministry and IPUCCF has people heading those sectors that are supposed to advise the CS being incompetent and therefore the CS should crack the whip because it is embarrassing.
However, the Ministries of Education and Treasury maintain that the government remains committed to clearing the arrears, but in 2 installments, citing the tough economic situation facing the country.
50% in financial year 25-26, and then 50% in 26-27.
My plea is accept the 50-50 and let us move from this mountain.
After renewed appeals from the government and the parliamentary committee, lecturers appeared to slightly soften their stance but maintain that the first installment by 80%.
The worst of the worst, Chair, is 80-20. They give us 80% and 20% to remain. My irreducible minimum for the sake of you and the honorable committee members and the students of this country. I'm going to plead with our members so that we can reconsider. You don't push us.
All eyes on the unions to see whether they will accept the government's proposal and call off what has become a lengthy lecturers' strike.
The ministry should apologize to us.
Willie Lusige, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The death toll in the Elgeyo Marakwet mudslide has climbed to 34 after 2 more bodies were retrieved. This comes even as search efforts continue, with the government deploying sniffer dogs to help in the search and recovery efforts. Stephen Latour reports.
2 more bodies have been retrieved as such efforts continue in Chesongoch in Elgeyo Marakwet tragedy. Efforts to get more bodies trapped in the mudslide are ongoing, with government scaling up its search efforts by deploying sniffer dogs to help identify areas where raging mudslides buried the victims. At the St. Benedict Center, we meet this woman whose university son, who had returned home following lecturer strike, is still buried in the mud.
Naomba serikali wanisaidie kusomesha huyu kijana mwenye alikuwa shule ya KMTC. Nimepoteza huyu wa university. Na mpaka saa hizi hajaonekana.
The government is currently undertaking resettlement of affected families, providing food and non-food aid, and moving those in danger to safer grounds.
Watoto yangu amechukuliwa na maji yote, sina bado na hii mse. Na hakuna kitu yeyote, na hakuna kitu nyumbani. In the neighboring Iten, where a similar tragedy occurred, the family that lost 2 family members is in mourning as they try to come to terms with the tragic loss.
Sana. Ile watu waliingia hapo chini ya hiyo mawe. Iko bise singine haijapatikana. Hatukurogota sote. So itabidi sasa tuende mpaka hapo na tuombe area hiyo pia.
Watu wangetolewa waende sehemu ya juu, alafu upande wa hanging file yote ikuwe conservation area, waweke tu miti blue gum yote. I think hatutakuwa na shida tena.
For now, the government has called on all those living around the mudslides prone areas to move to safer grounds. Stephen Latour, Citizen TV.
Human rights activists are now calling for the immediate resignation of Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and Kenya's current ambassador to Uganda over failure to address the whereabouts of activists Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo. The civil society groups also allege that the duo are being tortured in solitary confinements in the neighboring country. Seth Olale with the latest.
With Tuesday marking 36 days since activists John Njagi and Nicholas Oyo were abducted in Uganda, their whereabouts remain unknown. Fellow activists held demonstrations in solidarity with their colleagues at the Ugandan High Commission in Nairobi to push the Ugandan authorities to release the duo they claim are being held in Uganda.
We will not get tired until we see our comrades free, even if it means that we will come and keep vigil here.
The civil society groups demanding immediate resignation of Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi and Kenya's current ambassador to Uganda to resign. over failure to address the whereabouts of activists John Njagi and Nicholas Oyo.
I am really pursuing my government to make sure that they bring our comrades home.
Until now, he has not even spoken anything about our comrades who are missing.
The human rights activists who claim that the health of activists John Njagi and Nicholas Oyo is deteriorating say they will not relent in demanding justice for their colleagues.
So tunaomba tu William Samoei Ruto atafute vijana wetu atulali.
Oyo and Njagi are reported to have been abducted on October 1st in Uganda by armed men believed to be security officials, even as the High Court of Uganda ruled that the two activists will be categorized as missing persons. Seth Olale, Citizen TV.
Right, now, Black Friday originated in the US in the 1950s, talking about the crazy sales during Thanksgiving, but it has quickly become a global phenomenon for sales for end-of-year shopping, particularly now with online sales. And so with Black Friday well underway for the month of November, what are the deals that are in it for you from Jumia? And indeed, what is the state of e-commerce? We have that wide-ranging, broad industry conversation on Power Talk with Vinod Goel, who is the regional CEO for East Africa, Jumia, that is. So that's a great conversation that's coming up on Power Talk right after the break. You want to tune in for that. Also, later on the program, we shall be speaking with UN Resident Coordinator Dr. Stephen Jackson on the relevance of the United Nations 80 years on in the world today. All of that is coming up after the break here on The Explainer tonight, so please do stay with us. And coming up on Power Talk, we speak with Jumia on the state of e-commerce in the country and how Black Friday drives online shopping in the region.
Make your home a signature home. Introducing Lifestyle Steel Stone Coated Roofing Tiles, where roofing excellence is backed.
Today we're talking about something that makes quite a few people go crazy. It's Black Friday on Jumia from the 31st of October, running all through the month of November. We'll talk about that and the deals in a moment, but it is an important time to take stock of the state of e-commerce in the country, how it compares to global statistics, and how it is revolutionizing access to consumers, but also empowering vendors and traders. Let's talk a little bit about that now with Vinod Goel, who is the regional CEO for Jumia East Africa. It's good to see you and good to have you on the program today.
Thank you, Juan. It's such a pleasure to have a chat with you. I've heard so much about you and very, very eager to tell you the story, the deals, everything.
Thank you. And we will talk about Black Friday in a moment and what sort of deals exist there. Let's talk about the state of e-commerce in the country, because that is exactly what you do. What does it look like? What are the numbers? What are the key drivers of this subsector of the economy?
Yeah. So e-commerce, I like the word you used, subsector. It's becoming a mainstream channel in the part of the economy. In some part of the world, in Southeast Asia, India, China, the contribution of the channel has gone to very big numbers as a percentage of retail. In our context, in our areas, it is still the beginning. We are talking about 4-5% of the total retail market, but that's the beauty of it. And we are at the very interesting tipping point where we are seeing more and more consumers. And we can easily guess it. We are a very young nation. How many young people would like to haggle and travel to the CBD and talk to 15 shops and try to buy an earphone, or a lady who looking to buy a chest freezer or a microwave or a cell phone? Why not to just have few clicks? First of all, compare everything, get the best prices, and deliver the things at home. the value proposition is so different that we have huge tailwinds towards e-commerce, and it is becoming a mainstream part of the economy.
Right, and the numbers are impressive as well in terms of the market projections of e-commerce in the country, right?
Yeah.
$1 billion in revenue, I believe.
Yeah.
For
absolutely.
Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the numbers are very big. I mean, the total industry is huge. What we are saying is that as a share, which e-commerce has taken, is still very small.
Okay.
Despite that small percentage, it's a very big number.
Yeah.
Right. But I think for consumers and for our audience, what is very important is that what is in it for me? Like, how do I become part of this such a big billion, trillion story? Is really the access of the right goods at the right price, at the right convenience. And that's it. That's all I want. Right.
And are consumers embracing it?
Well,
from what you see?
So, you know, Jumia is in the story in the journey of 12th year, 13th year, right? In Kenya, 12 years. And of course, the journey has been painfully slow, which has been the case everywhere, by the way. But I think what we have reached is that cusp, is the culmination, is the tipping point where the growth is very high, which means not only the existing customers are buying different type of goods. So for example, there is a female customer who was largely buying beauty products, has started to buy home goods, and maybe also taking a decision in electronics, which was probably the decision of the man of the house. But she said, you know what, I can probably crack a better deal for a 43-inch TV.
Right.
Let me do it for you. Right. And similarly, we have the new customers who are, you know, influxing towards e-commerce, and we are facing a huge tailwinds. So we are doing a lot of work to grow, but then there is a huge tailwinds as well, which is fantastic, and it has come after a decade of work, so we're really enjoying that.
Right, and it's also empowering vendors and startups and SMEs.
Well, absolutely. I wish, as I was telling you, I could invite you in our vendor event. We met recently around 120 vendors. Who are the vendors? Just to simplify it, these are the people who sell on Jumia, right? And I just sat peacefully to listen their stories. And I said to one of the ladies, her name is Leah, and I said, like, okay, you sell pillows on Jumia. How did you even start? Like, why pillows? And she said, like, I had little money, and I bought 5 pillows, and I want to sell them. Now, you can't really open a physical shop in town to sell 5 pillows. You can't distribute 5 pillows, right? Because the working capital is very small she had.
Yeah.
But she can open a shop on Jumia, and she sold 5 pillows, and she made money for 10. She bought 10, and today she is one of the biggest seller of home products, not only pillows, the mosquito nets, the rugs, the kitchen, the dining sets, some furniture as well. She manages 15 people, and she has 2 shops in the town. Like, what else? But this does not end here on the trade. The best part is she actually sometimes goes on a small talk on how to run digital business, and she motivates a lot of her neighborhood that, you know what, you can just start a digital business. Even on Instagram, you do not have to be Jumia all the time. You can start on Instagram, Facebook, when you are ready on Jumia, etc. And she has become a powerhouse. And then I sat with 15 people, and more or less they have the story of like this. They started a small business individually, and today they are the leaders of small digital businesses. Isn't that wonderful?
It's impressive to hear. The question I want to ask now with that is in terms of reach. Many people would think e-commerce is more geared towards the urban consumer, but are you reaching those in the rural areas? And also, I ask this fully knowing that you are, you know, online. But how do you reach offline customers? There are still issues of connectivity, access to smartphones, access to you know, good internet connections. So talk to us about the demographics of your consumer, if there's any from the rural areas, and also how you're able to reach those who don't have access.
Right. So you asked me 2-3 questions
in
I know
the same
in one.
Breath, but
but let me go one by one. Right. So you are absolutely right. In the international arena, e-commerce makes sense on a, let me put it in a small equation. It needs a lot of people, densely populated in urban areas, have a lot of money. Okay, so that's population density, GDP per capita, and the population size. All right, you multiply the 3, and that number has to be big. Then only e-commerce companies wants to go that area, right? Problem is, in our area, in our context, we do not have that equation. We do not have densely populated areas, a lot of them, right? If you go to Uganda, we have only one city above 1 million population. In Kenya, we have 4, right? We know we do not have a lot of population with huge disposable income, right? So the first thing we did is that e-commerce should not be for disposable item, for fancy stuff, for accessories only. No, you really need to serve the basics. So we could easily get the deal for you on a 55-inch Sony TV, but what is really required is a 45-inch or 43-inch Vitron or MTech or Skyworth, right? So we need to get the best deal. So that is the first thing, what people need. It's about the needs, it's not about the disposable income. The second thing, we said, okay, all these people we were talking about, the sellers who were selling, they were selling in the radius of 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and that's it. Right? Even if you're selling on Instagram, how are you going to serve an item if you have an order from Molo?
Right.
It's almost impossible, right? You have to put it in a bus and do 15, 20 calls to make it happen. And I think the second thing we did is that, okay, we need to empower these sellers, and their market is not 2 kilometers, it's 800 kilometers. Today, they are serving in 2 kilometers. Tomorrow, they can have an order from Lambu, right? Now, your question is that, how do we bridge the gap for the people who are living outside Nairobi? A lot of people do not have, luckily Kenya is pretty ahead in the penetration of smartphone and internet, but still we have around 30-40% of the population who is off-grid. They do not have access to smartphones, they do not have access to internet, and last but not the least, they are not digitally trained, or they do not trust digital channels, right? We have a fantastic channel on this one, which does not exist in any e-commerce companies outside Africa, which we call JForce. So JForce is nothing but an army of freelancers, agents, who are onboarded on Jumia's platform, trained by us. They will literally, if you are in a small town in Sagana or in Ahero, they will stop you and say, Yvonne, I think you should probably buy a new coat, you know, and they will show you all the deals, and they will place the order for you. So hence, you don't need a smartphone, internet, or the confidence. They'll place the order for you, and you will become the first-time digital customer for Jumia, and you will get the items delivered to you.
So that's
and that is the
bridge.
We have to put in place. And we have around tens of thousands of these agents. And it's also a wonderful thing for them, not only making those small commission money, sometimes it is not small if they're serious about it, but the best thing we are really proud is the digital education they get. So they get to know how this machinery works, and either they stick with us or they start something else, which is absolutely beautiful as well.
All right, yeah, win-win. So let's talk about the wins now. Black Friday 2025, what's new, what's in it for consumers? Started on the 31st of October, runs through to the 30th of November, right? Okay, so talk to us about what's new this year and what consumers can expect.
So, first of all, a lot of people know about Black Friday, right? So they know sometimes even more than me what should look for, where to look for it. You know, sometimes we do a treasure hunt at midnight of the launch. Within 5 seconds, everything is gone because of these people. So first thing is, people love it, they know about it. What is new? I think every time we try to bring millions and millions more products which Kenyans want, as simple as that. There is nothing fancy we have to do, right? If the most sold shoe which people are loving is a white shoe with 2 stripes and has to be less than $11, that is our job, to bring that shoe in enough quantity for the customers. I gave you one example of a product, and Jumia has right now 11 million products available on the platform, and a majority of them on unbelievable price, and that is Black Friday.
70%? For some products, up to 70% off?
Yes, up to 70%. So this is, again, you know, the vendors also wait for this period.
Right.
And they said, you know what? The way vendors say it, my second half is starting now. So the business they do in the first 10 months is equivalent to the business they're going to do in the next 2 months. right? November and December is half of the year for them. And they come up with huge amount of discounts and huge amount of assortment. And our job is to absorb all that, curate it for our customers and pass it on, and do our job of delivering the products in a right way, you know? So deals and deals and deals on everything. You talk about a toaster, a blender, a kettle, a mosquito net, pillows, shoes, whatnot. Like, I can't name it, but there is everything for everyone. And I really urge the audience to come up and enjoy it. It's a lot of hard work for you.
Yeah.
It's a short time.
All right, it is indeed. And we're now a couple of days into it. So looking forward to that experience. And of course, hearing how e-commerce is driving the economy and empowering vendors and consumers as well, offering them the issue in the matter of choice and need based on cost. Thank you very much. We look forward to what happens this year. Of course, with everything that you have available. Thank you very much. Vinod Goel, who is the regional CEO for Jumia East Africa, talking about the state of e-commerce in the country, in the region, and of course, Black Friday that runs all the way till the 30th of November 2025. That's Power Talk. Thanks for watching. All right, welcome back to The Explainer tonight. The United Nations turns 80 this year in 2025. The origins of it, I will let my guest talk about in just a moment. But was made in a world that was completely different 80 years ago to where we are today. Is the UN still relevant in the world today, considering the crises, the situations, not just in Kenya, in Africa, but around the world? That's what we're here to talk about, the relevance of the UN at 80 in a modern world. And the UN resident coordinator, Dr. Stephen Jackson, joins me. Thank you very much for making time for us on The Explainer tonight.
Yvonne, thank you very much for having me on The Explainer.
All right. So before we begin, I know you wanted to say something about what's happening in Elgeyo Marakwet.
I was watching the really harrowing news footage of Elgeyo Marakwet. So first and foremost, from the UN, to send our heartfelt condolences to the friends and family of those who've lost their lives. And just to say, I mean, I'm proud to say we have a team from the World Health Organization, WHO, working very closely with the Ministry of Health, doing what we can, but a terrible situation.
It is indeed, and we hope for the best, especially as the search and recovery efforts continue.
Indeed.
Let's talk about UN turning 80. And I want to ask this, we have a varied audience, many of them young people.
Sure.
Talk to us about the origins of the United Nations 80 years ago, why it was formed, and what you believe the impact it has had in the world and in Kenya.
Yep. So I'm going to give you a yes, but answer. I'm very proud of the United Nations. I think we should all be, because the UN is everybody. It's 193 countries. It's everybody on the planet. But I do also think that the UN, like any organization at 80, it's got to look at itself pretty hard in the mirror, and it's got to do some changing. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. You're right to say that the world in which the UN was born was a very different one. It was the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. It was born out of the determination of those who'd fought in that war to say, we must never do this again, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. That's what the UN Charter says. Over the course of 80 years, it has grown and changed and adapted and indeed reformed. But much of the DNA of the UN still is from that era. And as our Secretary General said memorably a year or so ago, you can't plan for the world of our grandchildren with an organization that was designed by our grandparents. So we do have to change. I think the impact has been huge and continues to be around the world. Let me just give you a few quick sort of numbers. Right now, globally, UN agencies are keeping alive about 150 million or more people affected by severe hunger, 150 million. By coincidence, it's about the same number, about 150 million or a little bit more, that we believe are the number of kids that have been saved by the vaccination programs that the UN supports around the world. And so I could go on multiplying those examples. There are 11 countries around the world where there are peacekeeping operations, 65,000 peacekeepers, many of them Kenyan, quite a number of them women, as we were discussing together at a meeting earlier today.
Yeah.
Kenya serving very proudly in Haiti, Somalia and elsewhere. So I do think that the impact has been enormous and continues to be. But I also do think that, as I said, an organization that is 80 years old, you have to expect it to change.
Yeah. Let's talk about that change now. So obviously coming out of the Second World War, let's take a look at where the world is now. There's various flashpoints of conflict around the world, a very different state of play. And there's many who say, well, the UN isn't really relevant anymore. When the UN Secretary General speaks and says he's deeply concerned about crisis in Sudan, in Yemen, in Gaza, that it has little weight, and isn't a call to action for actors in that particular scene. Is it still relevant in the world today, and what would need to change?
I profoundly believe it is still relevant, and I do think that the UN regularly makes calls to action. What we don't possess, except in rare instances, is the power to compel. And that does go back to the origins of the UN. So the only power to compel that the United Nations as a family has is when the Security Council does it. And the Security Council is an artifact of the Second World War. So, as your viewers I'm sure know, it has 15 members, 10 of whom change and 5 of whom don't. And the 5 who don't have a veto. Yeah. And so only when the Security Council can reach unanimity is when we can compel. And even then it's pretty tough. At rock bottom, we are an organization of member states. That's our superpower, and it's also our weakness. Now, you said, and you were quite right, Yvonne, it was a different world back then. It was a world of a much smaller number of member states. Yeah, for sure. Kenya was still a colony, God help us. Right. And by the way, the UN has a very proud record of helping through the decolonization period. Not, by the way, completely finished. We have a much larger number of countries now, each with an equal voice, except when it comes to the Security Council. Right. But we also have civil society, which we didn't have before. Right. We have the internet, which we didn't have before. We have a massive youth population, which we didn't have before. And in all those ways, the UN, I think, needs to adapt and change and reform in a way that takes account of that new reality. And that's difficult to do because the DNA remains member states, it remains countries, it remains governments.
In an African context where the median age roughly in general on the continent is 19, how does an 80-year-old organization speak to young people in Kenya? I mean, we've had a very active engagement from young people for years, but particularly and more so from 2024 to 2025. What do you say to these young people who are agitating and who want change now and who want involvement and look to the UN and say, but who are you and how can we engage with an 80-year-old organization?
Well, even before we talk about what I might say, there's the question of how I should listen, right? Because I think we talk a lot about, we must listen to youth. It's important that we listen to youth. There are 35 million young people in Kenya, and I often say if I listen to 35 million people, I will go deaf. Right. So what we've created, and it is an example, I hope, of how the UN is starting to change. We've worked with some very exciting Kenyan startups and civil society organizations to create a digital platform called ZK. Many of your viewers, I hope, have interacted with ZK. We've had tens of thousands of Gen Zs on it already. And that's a platform that allows young people to express themselves on public policy questions of the day, and to do it in a way that leads to, I think, concrete recommendations. That's just one example of, I think, how we're trying to adapt and change. But I do think the challenge for us, not just for the UN, for governments around the world, certainly for people of my generation, is to do a bit more listening and much less talking.
Reforms at the UN, there's been quite a few calls for that. Kenya's President, Dr. William Ruto, made those calls for reform when he addressed the UN General Assembly about a month ago, and he reiterated those calls today in Doha, Qatar, where he's attending the Second World Summit for Social Development. And again today, he's calling for 2 permanent, 2 non-permanent seats on the UN Security Council with full rights and privileges. Is this a call that is... are you alive to this fact and these calls in the UN? And what are your thoughts around a reform agenda, and not just for the UN Security Council, but I'm sure there's wider reforms that are required across the entire global organization?
Yes, so very alive to both. So let me talk about the call for reform to the Security Council, and then the broader call for reform.
Yeah.
And by the way, Kenya is an extremely powerful and valued voice for that reform. So on Security Council reform, Secretary General of the UN has been very clear about this. He demands reform. It isn't just that Africa doesn't have a permanent seat on the Council. And there are other parts of the world that are similarly excluded. The problem is it's not in his gift to make that change.
It's the member states.
It's the only people that can reform the Security Council are the members of the Security Council. And there's the rub. But we're absolutely on message with President Ruto, with the Kenyan people, and with others around the world who say that is a body that requires urgent reform. The broader reform, actually, if you're, I'm going to be probably accused of stumping for the president now, but if you haven't read what President Ruto's remarks were at the General Assembly just a few short weeks ago, it's a very, very interesting speech in which he says, on the one hand, the UN is not perfect and it needs to grow and change. And by the way, it has been growing and changing, and we can talk a bit more about that. But he said, be very careful. We need multilateralism. We mustn't kill it as we reform it, because we will never get it again. And this speaks to the very different world that we're in right now.
Right.
After the Second World War, there was a meeting of minds, and it was pretty rare and a pretty fleeting meeting of minds. And we would not get that meeting of minds in today's world. So if you do away with the UN, you're going to be without a multilateral instrument altogether. You're going to be without an instrument where the nations of the world can meet to a large extent on an equal footing, where they can come together to find collective solutions for the big problems that face us.
Is that still possible in the world today? There's a huge move to bilateralism, away from multilateralism. Strong leaders, strong-willed leaders who wake up and make a decision, some would say on a whim, and that could change the entire course of history, world economy, trade. How does the UN then become the force for multilateralism? And maybe multilateralism is gone.
This may be the only point in the evening, Yvonne, where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't see a huge move away from multilateralism. What I see, and it embarrasses me, it saddens me, is actually a few countries, some of them very powerful, broadly speaking in my part of the world, who used to be some of the loudest cheerleaders for multilateralism. They're the ones, I hope temporarily, turning their backs on multilateralism. But actually, everywhere else in the world, here on the African continent, in many parts of Asia, many parts of Latin America, and still in many parts of Europe, my country Ireland, you hear a very strong continued call for multilateralism. And why? Because the big problems of the day can only be solved multilaterally. Climate change. We can only do it if we can only solve it if we solve it together. The global resurgence of conflict, same story. Pandemics, COVID. We only were able to deal with COVID as we came together, right? And the cost of development. They're convenient. They all start with C, right? Climate, conflict, COVID, cost of development. They're easy to remember. Those are all things that are only susceptible to a planet-wide solution. Now, multilateralism is not only provided by the United Nations. It's provided by the African Union on the African continent. It's provided by the G20 for some of the rich countries. There's the BRICS. So there are new spaces where multilateral action is happening. But I still believe, as a matter of faith, that the UN remains very important. Is it perfect? No. And I'm not going to stand here and say that it's ever been perfect, because humanity is not perfect and the planet is not perfect, and the UN is a reflection of that. But I do think it's amongst the best things that we have, and so what we need to do is make it better and stronger and adapt it to a very different world in 2025 than we had in 1946.
Right, and part of that, you know, the new changes is also in the issue of funding.
Yes.
The goodwill that existed around the world 80 years ago, after the Second World War, when the world said never again, that, you know, confidence, that funding, that support doesn't exist now. With the situation we've just talked about, with perhaps some of the bigger nations moving away from multilateralism, moving more towards the art of the deal, now withholding funding. Is this an issue, a concern within the UN? I would imagine also, you know, we're seeing cutbacks on funding. What does that do to the role, the mandate, and the work that you do?
It's a deep concern. And first and foremost, it is a failure of global solidarity from the most wealthy. And that is, it's both an enormous source of damage. I also think it's an enormous source of moral shame. In terms of humanitarian need, the emergencies around the world, both natural disasters and conflicts, we've never had it worse, or rather, since 1946, since the end of the Second World War, we have the largest humanitarian need we've ever had, but humanitarian spending is taking a nosedive. And that is a failure of global solidarity. And I think the world will live to regret that. And we are feeling it. We're feeling it hard here. To come to Kenya, so Kenya has, you know, the benefit of not having been plunged into the kinds of broad conflict that have affected countries in the region, affected countries in the Middle East and so on. But even here, we had, because of climate change, between 2021 and 2023, we had the most severe drought that Kenya has known since records began. 6 million people affected at the height. Kenya government was looking after 3 million of those. The UN and international partners were looking after 3 million of those. If that drought reproduces itself tomorrow, I can't say with my hand on my heart that we're going to be in a position to look after 3 million people again, because we won't have the resources to do it.
And so how do we inspire, how do we lobby for some more funding? Most of development aid is now, most countries are now cutting back on development aid and going into defense spending. Naturally, with what we see around the world, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in Israel and Gaza. So what do we do?
If you go on a visit to the United Nations headquarters in New York, the other headquarters, as I call it, because this is a headquarters. This is a global headquarters.
It is indeed, yes.
We should be very proud in Kenya of the fact that this is one of the 4 global headquarters. But if you go to the one in New York, there's a clock that ticks up, telling you second by second how much is being spent on defense in the world. And I can tell you that clock, it was always going quickly, and it was trillions of dollars. Well, it's doing this now, right? Which is, again, is just appalling. I mean, as a planet, we should be ashamed of ourselves. This is the 21st century. We're supposed to be better than this. In terms of where that leaves us on the financing question, well, where do we turn? More and more of Kenya's development, because Kenya, there are deep pockets of poverty, there are deep pockets of hardship, and I know for Wananchi, it can be very hard day to day. Overall, Kenya has been on an upwards path, not as rapid and not as complete as I think everybody would want, but it's been an upward path. That means more and more of the development financing actually has to come from domestic resources. That means tax and then spend effectively, right? And then also from investment, right? So more and more of it is going to have to be lending, but lending that has to be on terms that the country can afford, and it isn't right now. But that's not the case for a country like Central African Republic or Burundi or some of the countries in the Middle East that are engulfed in conflict. There, you need aid. You need humanitarian aid, and it's not coming. And I'm really very worried about what awaits countries that are deep in conflict. I mean, we can just look to the northwest of us. I mean, in Sudan.
Right.
I mean, the appalling suffering.
Yeah.
And where's the response? And the UN can do very little if it's not given the means. And I am deeply worried by that.
Yeah. Does the UN respond, and I'm going to ask, this is a political question, does it respond adequately, fast enough to countries in the global south compared to those in the global north? Yeah.
I think it responds at the same speed, but is that response ever adequate? Never. And why? So if we look at humanitarian appeals, so if there's a conflict in country X or there's a drought in country Y, what do? We estimate the need and we put an appeal out there. No humanitarian appeal in the history of the United Nations, to my knowledge, has ever been 100% funded.
Yeah.
No, it's always underfunded. It has been the case that some conflicts closer to the north have got closer to 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that that's shameful.
Because there is a sense in which
one life,
Sudan, Yemen, and many other regions, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is right next door, feel ignored.
We do have situations, and I abhor it, where I talk to our donor partner countries and they will say kind of apologetically, we're really sorry, there's no more money for.
Yeah. So is a life in the Democratic Republic of Congo worth the same as a life elsewhere in the global north?
Yes.
To the UN?
And to the UN, yes. But to our partners, I sometimes wonder. It's a profound article of faith for me that every life matters. And that's why, and maybe I'm a bit partisan, I've spent most of my career working on this beautiful continent, because I happen to think that African lives matter very, very much. And well, you can probably hear it. I should calm, but it makes me very angry that that isn't how the wealthy of the world always see it.
Yeah. I want us to talk about something else, because now that we have you here, Stephen, you can help us with some understanding. There's been lots of talk about UN agencies that are coming to Nairobi. Like you rightly said, Nairobi is one of the 4, global headquarters. But it would seem that it would be more significant now that we have you here. I don't even want to mention them. Maybe you could help us dispel myths, rumors, and everything. These three, we understand, UN agencies that are coming to Nairobi. Are you going to confirm or deny? Are we going to do the confirm or deny?
We can do a bit of confirm and deny.
Okay,
but you carry on with your question and then I'll respond. Yeah.
Tell us about these UN agencies that are coming to the country, because I think this is the moment we have the UN resident coordinator. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about these agencies that are coming, which ones, when they're coming, and then we can talk about some of the concerns that, and maybe hopes that Kenyans might have with respect to that.
So, first of all, as you've noted and I noted, this is one of the 4 global headquarters of the UN, and it has been for decades, very proudly. It is the only one in the global south. The other 3, New York, Vienna, Geneva, they're all in the industrial north. So Nairobi has always had a very particular importance, and if I haven't said it already, I should record our deep gratitude to Kenyans and Kenya for that, for making a home for multilateralism here. It has always been a global headquarters for what we call the UN Secretariat, and there are also 2 major agencies that have their headquarters, their global headquarters here. That's the UN Environment Programme and UN Habitat. That means that this is the capital of environmental and climate diplomacy in the world, and climate science. What we've started to see over the last couple of years is a slow but continuous movement of staff, capacity, expertise from a number of different specialized agencies, as we call them, of the United Nations, moving staff to Kenya. So the first myth I want to dispel is the notion that any agency that I could mention of the UN, and you know we have an alphabet soup of them, going all the way from the Food and Agriculture Organization all the way to the World Meteorological Organization. So it is not correct to say that any agency right now has taken the decision to move lock, stock and barrel in its totality to Nairobi. That's not happening. What we are having is particular teams or particular divisions or particular capacities in some of those agencies moving. So the first thing to say is it's happening. The second is it's been happening for a little bit. The third thing to say is it's not as big or as seismic right now as I think social media thinks it is, right? It is not thousands of people, it's hundreds.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is supposed to happen by 2026?
It's happening gradually, and it's
Right.
happening on the calendar of each of those agencies.
Okay.
So some have already taken the decision to move, 100 people here. Some are still thinking about it. Some are looking at the global landscape and going, what is our budget going to look like? Can we afford to move? Can we afford not to move? So it's a little bit of a swirling situation, and I can understand, therefore, why there would be a bit of uncertainty.
So are they, you've talked about, so are they moving their headquarters? And just so we're clear,
No.
the three global UN offices that are
Here.
making some movement here, in a more substantive way, UNICEF, UNFPA and UN Women?
That's my understanding. I mean, if I sound like I'm evading it, it's because
Right.
this is actually, that's not my job, right?
Okay, yes.
I'm the UN for Kenya.
Right.
So we could have somebody come on and give you the chapter and verse. But that is my understanding, that those agencies are bringing some capacity here. I think UNFPA has already done so.
Right.
But as I say, it's measured in the hundreds. It's not the thousands. It's not the totality of the agency. UNFPA, for example, is still headquartered in New York. I'll go out on a limb. Do I exclude that in a decade from now that things might change and that might be a bigger move? I don't totally exclude it. What I think is happening, and I think it's very interesting, is that the UN, for the first 20 years of its existence through to the beginning of decolonization, well, it was largely an organization of the global north and to some extent the Latin American countries. Then we had the glorious moment where countries like Kenya were getting their independence in the 60s, and they begin to change the power balance in the UN. That process is continuing, and I do feel as though we're in a very strange moment globally. I think we are in a moment where if I can put it this way, the axis of multilateralism is tipping towards the south.
Is that why they're moving here, or there are other reasons?
That's one. Oh, sorry, go on.
Such as funding?
Funding is part of it, but I think it is also a reflection of that. This is where not only we're hearing, it's not only that we're hearing belief in multilateralism from Africa, but this is where multilateral solutions are being born. This is where the ideas are coming from. This is where a lot of the creativity is coming from. And I think it is an expression of that. The world's changing very fast. Personally, I expect the continent of Africa won't need this kind of aid for beyond another, 25 years, tops. Africa's rising very fast. I know we focus a lot on the doom and the gloom, but 12 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world are on this continent. So it's also because of that the UN is bringing capacity here, because this is beginning to be where the global center of gravity is.
There is mixed, I think the news of this was met with mixed reaction.
Sure.
So there are some who say, well, this is good, there's going to be perhaps more money, more, dollars into the economy. And there's others who are thinking, okay, so let's put it bluntly, Stephen, not some more expatriates into Nairobi. They drive the prices of everything up. They live in their own little bubble and away from the rest of the Kenyan community. So just your comment on this mixed bag of reactions to the news that there could be, more UN presence in Kenya in the coming months.
So I plead guilty to a little bit of that. My wife and I chose not to live in the bubble. We don't live in Gigiri or Runda.
All right.
We wanted to live much closer to what we felt was the real Nairobi that we knew when we were volunteers here in the 1990s, and that we knew and loved. I understand why many of your viewers might feel like that. My first response would be to say, by far the largest number of people who work for the United Nations in Kenya are Kenyan. By far the largest number. And those are people working in the bit of the UN that I'm responsible for, which I call the UN in Kenya for Kenya, as opposed to the global headquarters, which is the UN in Kenya. They also work for that. There are very many Kenyans employed by the global headquarters here. And when we were talking before about staff moving here, what I really should have said was jobs moving here, because not everybody that had that job in New York will come here.
Okay.
It does prompt me to say one thing, public service announcement if I have time. We often get cases of poor Kenyans turning up at the gates going, I interviewed for a job and now I'm here to show up to work.
Yeah.
And we look and it was a scam. So what I would say to your viewers, please check, be very, very careful. If you're seeing lots of new jobs being advertised, that probably is a scam.
Right.
And you know when you know it's a scam? If you're ever asked for any money ever, because we never ask for money for employment, ever. There's no application fee, nada.
Yeah.
So if somebody has said, just send me this on M-Pesa, you know it's a scam.
Okay, all right. I want us to close our discussion here, Stephen. So as to where we go from here and where the UN goes, we know that there's some reforms that are being instituted by the Secretary General. Maybe you could talk to us about that. And like you say, and we understand that those decisions on the reforms will be made by the member states.
Yes.
But maybe you could speak to us about that push for reform within the United Nations and where we go from here as we close.
Okay. So, reform's already been happening.
Yeah.
I'm actually a child of reform, so my job was created for the first time as a full-time thing to try to oblige the different UN agencies to work together more effectively. That only happened in 2019. So that was the first phase of reform. But there's two very important elements of reform that I think the Secretary General, is identifying. One is cutting costs, right? So we have to make sure that every dollar, every shilling, every yen, every euro, every renminbi is used as effectively as it can. And there really is a strong efficiency drive there. The second is the number of what we call mandates. So what we mean is when the 193 member states in the General Assembly or the 15 member states in the Security Council say, UN, we want you to work on this. Do you know how many separate mandates we have? We tallied them up.
Right, yeah.
3,600. Oh. Ask any organization to do 3,600 things and you're probably asking for trouble.
And you're heavily bureaucratic.
Right.
That's what the UN is known for.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got to reduce that.
Yeah.
Right. And this SG is calling for that. He called for it very clearly.
Okay.
But the keys to that lie with the member states. And then the third thing is the number of UN entities that we have, which is a little bit a function of that mandate thing, right? So in the United Nations country team, here in Kenya, there are 25 agencies, funds and programs. And those are just the ones here on the ground. Then there are ones also doing programming from elsewhere. Yeah. Please don't ask me. It'd be like asking, you know, a parent to choose amongst their children. Don't ask me which ones I would merge.
Right, yeah.
But I think we can all agree 25 is too many.
Okay.
And so that also is on the table. So we are talking, and the Secretary General is talking about merger, streamlining, efficiency, and getting back to what we're good at and leaving to others what we're less good at. And I'm all for that.
Well, that's a good place to leave it. Hopefully we see less bureaucracy and the UN gets to move faster and speak to the realities of the day and the youthful population, not just in Kenya, Africa, but also around the world, and continuing to be relevant. Like you say, there's room for multilateralism, and it's perhaps the only way we can get out of all the crises we face in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Stephen Jackson, who's the UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya, speaking about the United Nations turning 80 and its role and mandate in the world 8 years on, and perhaps in another 80 to come. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. And in business news tonight, unpaid care work could contribute nearly as much as agriculture to the GDP, even as women continue to do the most unpaid care work.
Make your home a signature home. Introducing Lifestyle Steel Stone Coated Roofing Tiles, where roofing excellence is backed by a lifetime guarantee from Mabati Rolling Mills.
Welcome to Homelink Mabati Factory, your trusted partner in roofing. We provide high quality and durable products including box profile, V-tile, prime.
Tonight's business news. Unpaid domestic and care work is now emerging as a hidden pillar of the economy. A new report by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reveals that the labor of caring for children, the elderly and households, mostly performed by women, could be contributing almost as much to the country's GDP as agriculture. The findings also exposing the deep gender gap that continues to define household work in Kenya. Jasmine Wamboi has more details.
An analysis by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics paints a revealing picture of how much value unpaid care work adds to the country's economy and who bears the burden. The economic value of unpaid domestic and care work in Kenya report estimates that in 2021, unpaid domestic and care work generated 2.5 trillion shillings in gross value added, equivalent to 23% of Kenya's GDP.
This is a staggering contribution, greater than the combined gross value added of manufacturing, electricity supply, water supply, and construction.
That means that the value of unpaid household work nearly matches agriculture, which contributes about a quarter of Kenya's GDP. Yet, unlike agriculture, manufacturing or services, this labor remains invisible in national accounts, unrecognized and uncompensated.
Unpaid domestic and care work has been treated as a natural private responsibility rather than a productive economic activity. Yet, this is the sector that provides the foundation upon which all the economic activities rely on.
The data also reveals a stark gender gap. Women in Kenya spend an average of 4.5 hours per day on unpaid care work compared to just 54 minutes by men. In 2021, women spent 25.8 billion hours performing unpaid domestic and care duties, more than 5 times the 4.8 billion hours logged by men. The largest share of this time went into food and meal preparation. Women also spent nearly 10 times more on childcare and instruction work, amounting to 3 billion hours compared to men's 310 million hours.
Women in Kenya spend an average of 4.5 hours per day on unpaid care work, compared with 54 minutes by men. This imbalance creates time poverty, limiting women's and girls' opportunities for education, employment and leadership.
The government is now facing the uphill battle of investing in care infrastructure like water and energy.
It calls for us to look at how do we design our policies. It is also a call for us to look at how do we allocate resources and how do we measure progress. We should now move from recognition to action.
The report further urges the government to invest in facilities such as childcare centres and community-based elder care facilities. With a growing aging population here in the country, the demand for care work is expected to increase in the coming years. And this means that unpaid domestic care work could further strain households and communities if the government does not actively invest in care infrastructure. Jasmine Wamboi, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The Institute of Internal Auditors and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission have both defended the new e-procurement system, saying digitizing procurement will increase transparency and help fight corruption at the institutional level. Speaking in Mombasa at this year's International Auditors Conference, EACC Chair Bishop David Oginde noted that 80% of corruption cases are about procurement, and therefore there is need for government agencies to embrace the new system. Murang'a Governor, who officially opened the conference, has called for auditors to report directly to county governors if the governments are to deal with corruption.
When there's no power, we always come to
We propose that internal auditors be able to report directly to governors, so that function is strengthened. We also support the enhancement and the positioning of internal auditors, giving them better positioning within counties so that we try to fight waste.
As users, whoever are users and whoever are auditors should get the right skills so that they can interact with the platform with knowledge and with the right skills so that they are able to use the system at optimal levels.
Very idea that we can digitize our procurement. About 80% of corruption that we deal with are to do with procurement. And so if this is streamlined, we believe that a lot of our work will have been sorted out. Now, like any new system, the current system still needs a lot of refining, but that refining will come as a result of people beginning to use it.
The 8th edition of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers-backed Changamka Shopping Festival opened earlier today, with the manufacturing sector, industry leaders, government officials and development partners celebrating the sector's growth and its pivotal role in driving job creation and industrial transformation. The 4-day festival has attracted over 300 exhibitors, according to the association's CEO, Tobias Alando. The festival, testament to Kenya's position as the region's industrial hub, noting that Changamka demonstrates what is happening in manufacturing and what needs to change, even as it called on Kenyans and investors alike to support local industries.
Just direct sales. It's also about creating partnerships and business linkages towards different products. So right now we are inviting people, of course, just the general one to come and buy products, but also to have a conversation on how they can have partnership and distribute certain products here. So it's not more about just direct sales, but also business linkages and expansions.
Apart from just being, we are part of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have signed an economic partnership agreement with the European Union, where you can sell 14,000 products to 27 countries in the EU, duty-free, quota-free. We have an economic partnership agreement with the UK. We have an agreement with the United Arab Emirates. AGOA, which we have been enjoying with the US, again, has been extended by 1 year. We are at the tail end of discussing a strategic investment and partnership agreement with the US. We are also discussing with China about some of the markets that we need to open up. And so sometimes I feel like we have opened up so much market, but we are lacking the people to take advantage of.
All right, Nairobi United bounced back from their 3-0 loss to Sofapaka to blank Bandari FC 3-1 in the only Kenya Premier League match played at the Dandora Stadium Tuesday afternoon. The match was a cagey affair in the first half that ended in a 1-1 draw. The home team were the quickest off the block and were rewarded with a 5th-minute goal scored by Rwandi's import Prince Buregea. Bandari drew level 5 minutes before the breakthrough Jeffrey Ojunga. In the second half, Nairobi United were awarded a penalty in the 56th minute and was slotted in by Enoch Machaka. The icing on the cake came in the 85th minute, with veteran Shami Kibwana scoring the 3rd goal for the hosts. Naivos climbed to 6th on the log with 9 points, with Bandari dropping to 14th with 6 points.
Kanyagia Machaka, wapo wawili, Shami mwenye Kibwana, Shami.
Njoroge Kibugu put in an impressive show in the back 9 to come from 2 shots behind with the Sunshine Tour 7th leg at the Vetlab Sports Club. Kibugu went into the final round tied at the top of the leaderboard with John Wangai. Kibugu had a full start in the first hole, where he dropped a shot His nerves showing as he dropped 2 more shots in the 5th and 6th holes. Despite recovering with 2 birdies in the final 2 holes at number 8 and 9, Kibugu found himself 2 shots behind going into the back 9. He was fired up as he picked 4 birdies in a flawless display to finish 3 under par on the day. This gave him an overall score of 10 under par 206 to win the tournament ahead of John Wangai. Wangai picked 3 birdies, 2 bogeys in a consecutive display. Celestin Nsanzuera finished 3rd with series leader Greg Snow finishing 4th.
At the start, I had a few unlucky breaks, and I tried to keep my head in the game. I knew I was hitting the ball well, and all I had to do was give myself chances. So once I gave myself chances and hit greens, it was just time for the putts to drop.
My game plan was okay today since I started. Just get some frustrated on number 16 where just came off where I don't know how it came. Just missed a shot on tee shots where I made a bogey. I keep trying on 17. I get past 18, I made another mistakes.
Africa football legends have lauded the Confederation of African Football, CAF, in their efforts to improve the game in Africa. The legends were part of the CAF Champions League and CAF Confederations Cup draws conducted on Monday. Christopher Katongo, who won the AFCON with Zambia in 2012, said the draw was fair to all teams that qualified for the group stage. Former Arsenal player Alexander Song, who was capped 49 times by Cameroon, encouraged CAF to also borrow heavily from European governing body UEFA by giving all the teams more exposure. CAF has increased the money paid to teams taking part in the competitions, with all matches now available live to a wider audience across the globe.
Pyramid FC Egypt. You put more money, that's what I mean, like there's some small club, even the small club, if they go through, they can have money to develop the club, they can develop the structure. You know, when you have the facilities, it's more easy for you to try to build a good club. And then I'm happy because like the African football is going through